Imagine being 19, deeply in love with your first real boyfriend, thinking you'd found the person you'd spend your life with, only for your own mother to step in, tear you apart, and hand him over to your sister like he was some kind of trophy she could regift. That's not a dramatic movie plot. That's my life. Stay with me as I take you through what happened, because it's a story I never thought I'd tell. Back then, Cole Winslow was everything to me. We met in high school, and from the moment we started talking, it felt easy, safe, and exciting all at once. We'd spend hours driving around town, sharing fries at the little diner near the school, and dreaming about the future. I thought we were solid, like the kind of love that could survive anything. But I hadn't counted on my mother's plans for me. Patricia Hanford, my mother, had always made it painfully clear that my older sister, Melanie, was her favorite. Melanie was 2 years older, glamorous, confident, and had just come out of a messy breakup. According to my mom, Melanie deserved better, and apparently better meant Cole. My mom decided I was too young, too naive, and didn't understand men. She said Melanie was the kind of woman who could keep a man on track. I thought it was ridiculous, until I saw her putting it into action. At first, I didn't believe it when people hinted that my mom was encouraging Cole to spend time with Melanie. But then Cole started pulling away. The texts got shorter, the excuses longer. He said he was busy, but somehow he had time to stop by our house when I wasn't home, only to hang out with my sister. I confronted him once, but he brushed it off, saying I was overthinking things. Then, one evening, my mom sat me down. She didn't sugarcoat it. She told me Cole was going to marry Melanie. She said it was for the best, that I'd thank her one day. I was 19, blindsided and heartbroken. The wedding happened so fast it made my head spin. Within weeks, they were married, and I wasn't even invited. My mother called it a private family matter, as if I wasn't family at all. I packed my things and left. I didn't care where I went. I just knew I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. I ended up in another state, crashing on a friend's couch, starting over from scratch. I threw myself into work, anything to distract myself from the image of Melanie in her wedding dress, smiling next to the man I thought I'd spend forever with. Meanwhile, Melanie made sure I saw every happy moment of their life together, at least what she wanted the world to see. Vacation photos, anniversary dinners, new cars. She flaunted Cole like a trophy, as if to remind me of what she'd won. And there I was, trying to stitch my heart back together in a place where no one even knew my name. Starting over wasn't quick or easy, but little by little, I built a life that was mine alone. Denver became my safe place. I found a tiny apartment with creaky wooden floors and big windows that let the morning light pour in. I started working at a small interior design firm, taking whatever projects came my way. Small apartments, coffee shops, even a daycare once. Every job, no matter how modest, felt like a step forward. I poured myself into my work, turning bare spaces into something beautiful. Maybe it was my way of proving to myself that I could create something from nothing, even after everything had been ripped away from me. Years passed, and my walls, both the real and emotional ones, felt solid. I wasn't looking for love. Honestly, I wasn't sure I even wanted it again. Then I met Grant Delaney. It wasn't some whirlwind romance or dramatic meet-cute. We met at a friend's barbecue, standing near the grill, awkwardly trying not to get smoke in our eyes. He was easy to talk to, grounded in a way I hadn't seen before. Grant was different from Cole in every way that mattered. Where Cole had been charming but restless, Grant was steady and sure. He didn't play games, didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He listened, really listened, when I talked. He was older than me by a few years, financially stable, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew who he was and didn't need to prove it. We started seeing each other more often, coffee after work, weekend hikes, quiet dinners where we actually talked instead of scrolling through our phone. There was no rush, no pressure. For the first time, I felt like I could trust someone completely. He never made me feel like I had to compete for his attention or earn his respect. It was simply there from the start. After 2 years together, Grant proposed in the most unassuming way possible. We were sitting on the couch, halfway through a movie, when he took my hand and asked, "Would you marry me?" No flash, no big public display, just the two of us in the comfort of our own space. And that was exactly what I wanted. We married quietly in a small ceremony in the mountains, just a handful of close friends and no family. I didn't even send an invitation to my mother, Melanie, or Cole. I didn't want them there to taint the moment or pretend they cared. This was my new beginning, and I wasn't going to let the past creep in. Nearly a decade passed without a single phone call, text, or holiday card exchanged between me and them. I didn't miss them, not really. I thought about them sometimes, like you think about a storm you once survived. But I never felt the need to step back into that world. My life with Grant was calm, safe, and full of the kind of love I once thought didn't exist. And for the first time in years, I was truly at peace. One warm summer afternoon, Grant came home with an invitation in his hand. It was for a 20th wedding anniversary party for some mutual friends of his and mine, a couple I'd met only a few times but liked. The catch: the party was in my hometown, the place I had avoided for almost 10 years. I stared at the invitation for a long moment. My first instinct was to say no. That town was full of ghosts I didn't want to see. But Grant looked at me with that steady, reassuring smile of his. "We don't have to go if you're not comfortable," he said, but a part of me wondered if maybe enough time had passed. Surely people had moved on. Surely I had moved on. After a week of going back and forth in my mind, I told Grant we'd go. I convinced myself it would just be an evening of polite conversation with old acquaintances, maybe a few awkward smiles, and then we'd head home. Nothing more. The party was held at a beautiful event space near the river, with string lights hanging from the ceiling and music humming softly in the background. As we walked in, I noticed familiar faces, people from high school, old neighbors, even a few family friends. Some smiled warmly, others gave curious looks, but no one said anything cutting. I started to relax, and then I saw them, Melanie and Cole. They were standing near the bar, but they didn't look like the golden couple I remembered from years ago. Melanie's hair was shorter, her makeup heavier, and there was a tightness around her mouth that hadn't been there before. Cole looked older, worn down, with lines etched deep into his forehead. They weren't laughing or touching. In fact, they seemed almost stiff with each other. I froze mid-step. My heart gave that old, unwanted lurch, but it wasn't pain this time. It was something colder. I thought about turning around, slipping out quietly, but before I could move, Grant walked up beside me and rested a hand on the small of my back. That's when it happened. Melanie's eyes landed on me, and then on Grant. Her expression went from surprise to something sharper, almost like fear. Cole turned, saw us, and his face drained of color. His jaw tightened, his hands shoved into his pockets like he didn't know what else to do. They didn't smile. They didn't wave. They just stared, as if our presence alone had ripped open a door they'd been trying to keep shut. I kept my face neutral, though inside I was brimming with questions. Why the panic? Why the sudden tension? I hadn't spoken to them in nearly a decade, but as Grant leaned in to greet someone else nearby, I caught Melanie glancing at Cole with a look that told me everything. Whatever was between them and me wasn't buried after all. And tonight, I had just dug it back up without even trying. I took a slow breath and reminded myself not to give them the satisfaction of seeing me rattled. If Melanie wanted to stare holes through me, I wasn't 19 anymore, trembling under her smirks and my mother's disapproval. I straightened my shoulders, smoothed my dress, and let Grant's calm presence anchor me. Grant spotted them before I said a word. Without hesitation, he guided me over with that easy confidence of his. "Melanie, Cole," he greeted, his tone warm enough to be polite, but not quite friendly. I noticed right away that Cole wouldn't meet his eyes. He gave a stiff nod, mumbled something that might have been "hey," and shifted his weight like he couldn't wait to leave. Melanie, on the other hand, went into performance mode. Her voice was sugary, her smile stretched a little too wide. "Lydia, it's been what? Almost 10 years. She let her gaze flick to Grant, appraising him openly, before tilting her head. "And who is this?" "This is my husband, Grant Delaney," I said, keeping my tone light but firm. "Oh, your husband," she repeated, as if the word was new to her. "So, where did you two meet? What do you do, Grant?" Her voice was all curiosity on the surface, but I could hear the fishing underneath. She wanted to size him up, compare him to Cole, maybe figure out how I'd ended up with someone like. Grant answered simply, mentioning where we'd met through mutual friends, and gave the barest outline of his work. He didn't brag, didn't elaborate, but there was something else, an edge in his voice when he glanced at Cole, like there was more between them than just a handshake at a party. The conversation stalled after that, small talk running dry. Cole shifted from foot to foot, his eyes darting anywhere but toward me or Grant. Melanie tried to fill the silence with comments about the party, the decor, even the wine selection, but none of it landed. I caught Grant giving her polite smiles while his eyes stayed cool. It was subtle, but I knew him well enough to notice. This wasn't indifference. It was distance. And that's when I felt it, a low hum of tension threading through every word, every glance. It wasn't just old resentment between me and Melanie or awkwardness over the past. There was something else here, something I couldn't quite name yet, but I could feel it pressing in like the air before a storm. Eventually, another guest swept in to greet them, breaking the moment. Grant and I moved on, mingling with other friends, laughing in little bursts that felt almost normal. But every so often, I'd glance across the room and find Melanie watching us, her smile gone, her eyes sharp. And each time I wondered, was it jealousy, regret, or fear? I didn't know the answer yet, but I could tell one thing for sure. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. The party had ended hours ago, but my mind was still buzzing as Grant and I drove down the quiet highway toward Denver. The night air was cool, the road nearly empty, but I couldn't shake the image of Cole avoiding Grant's eyes like they burned. I glanced at Grant, his hands steady on the wheel, his gaze fixed ahead. "You didn't seem surprised to see them," I said carefully. He hesitated just long enough for me to notice. "I wasn't," he admitted finally. "I've met Cole before, years ago." My eyebrows lifted. "You have?" Grant let out a slow breath, as if deciding how much to tell me. "He worked for me for a short time, back when I was running a different branch of my company. It didn't last long, maybe 3 months. I could tell there was more, so I waited. He was fired," Grant said bluntly, "for stealing money." The words landed like a slap. "Stealing?" He nodded. "Small amounts at first, enough to make me suspicious. Then I caught him taking cash outright. I confronted him, gave him the chance to own up to it, but he denied everything. We let him go quietly. I figured it wasn't worth the mess of pressing charges, but word got around in certain circles." I leaned back in my seat, stunned. "So he's a thief, and you had no idea he was the guy I used to?" "Not until tonight," Grant said, glancing at me briefly before looking back at the road. "I didn't connect the dots until I saw the two of you in the same room." My thoughts started tumbling over each other. Cole, broke and desperate. My mother, suddenly pushing him toward Melanie like she was saving him from something. The whirlwind wedding. The way she'd told me I was too young, but never once mentioned that he was drowning in financial trouble. What if it hadn't just been about her favoritism? What if my mother had seen Cole as a project for Melanie to fix? Or worse, as someone she could help in exchange for his loyalty to her favorite daughter? I remembered how quickly everything had happened. 1 week Cole was mine, the next he was Melanie's fiancé. No one talked about his job or his finances then. And now, hearing this from Grant, it felt like a missing puzzle piece had just clicked into place. A slow, cold suspicion spread through me. Maybe my mother hadn't just been meddling in my love life out of preference. Maybe she'd seen an opportunity to secure a man for Melanie, help him out of his mess, and leave me in the dust without a second thought. I turned my face toward the window, watching the dark blur of trees along the roadside. Whatever the truth was, it was starting to feel uglier than I'd ever imagined. And now, I wasn't sure I could just let it stay buried. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee growing cold in my hand. Sleep hadn't come easily, and when it did, my dreams were a jumble of my mother's voice, Cole's face, and Grant's words about the theft. I knew I wouldn't be able to move forward without answers. There was only one person I could think of who might still have a clear line to Melanie, my cousin, Erin Braddock. She'd always been the kind of person who kept one foot in every camp, never fully taking sides. We hadn't spoken much in recent years, but if anyone knew what had really happened back then, it would be her. I stared at her name on my phone screen for a long moment before hitting call. She answered after a few rings, her voice warm but cautious. "Lydia? Wow, it's been a while." "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile into my tone. "Listen, I have to ask you something about Melanie and Cole. It's important." There was a pause, and I could almost hear her brain working. "What about them?" "I need to know the truth," I said. "Before they got married, did my mom know Cole was in trouble financially?" Silence. "Erin." She sighed, the sound heavy. "Yes, she knew. Everyone close to the family did. Cole was drowning in debt. Credit cards, personal loans, you name it. He'd made some bad decisions, and it was catching up to him fast." I felt my stomach twist. "And she helped him?" "Not just helped him," Erin said slowly. "She paid off a big chunk of what he owed. But it wasn't charity. She told him, straight up, that if he wanted her help, he needed to choose the right daughter." The words hit me like ice water. "The right daughter," I repeated. "She met Melanie," Erin confirmed. "Your mom always thought Melanie could handle a man like Cole. She said you were too soft, too trusting, that you'd let him slide, and he'd never shape up. But Melanie, well, she thought Melanie would keep him in line. And I guess she thought it was a good match for both of them." I gripped the phone tighter. "So, all that stuff about me being too young, not understanding men, it wasn't about protecting me. It was about making sure Melanie got him." "Lydia," Erin said quietly, "I don't think your mom ever meant to hurt you. But she made a choice for Melanie's benefit, and Cole went along with it because it solved his problem. That's the truth." I thanked her and ended the call, my mind spinning. In that moment, everything became painfully clear. My heartbreak hadn't been some tragic twist of fate. It had been arranged. My mother had brokered a deal, and I'd been the cost. And the worst part? Cole had agreed to it, trading me for a clean slate without a second thought. By the time evening rolled around, I'd made up my mind. Hearing it from Erin wasn't enough. I needed to look Cole in the eye and hear the truth come from his own mouth. If I was going to move forward, I wanted every piece of this ugly puzzle in place. I sent him a short, polite message through social media. "Hey, I'm in town for a bit. I think it's time we put the past behind us. Want to meet for coffee?" He responded within an hour. "Sure. Tomorrow afternoon?" We agreed on a small coffee shop in the older part of town, the kind of place where the chairs didn't match and the air smelled like cinnamon and fresh espresso. When I walked in the next day, he was already there, sitting hunched over a black coffee. If I'd been expecting the same confident, smooth-talking Cole I'd once known, I was in for a surprise. His hair was thinning, his shoulders slumped, and there was a heaviness in his eyes that made him look 10 years older than he actually was. "Lydia," he said when he saw me, standing awkwardly as I approached. I smiled faintly and sat down. "It's been a long time." We exchanged the usual pleasantries, talking about neutral things, the weather, the changes in town, the coffee shop's new owner. But I had no intention of letting this stay polite and shallow. "So," I said after a pause, leaning back in my chair, "I've been thinking about how fast everything happened back then. You and Melanie, the wedding. It always felt sudden to me." He shifted uncomfortably. "Yeah, it was quick." "Why?" I asked, keeping my tone gentle, almost curious. "I mean, you and I were together, and then suddenly you weren't, and you were engaged to my sister." He looked down into his coffee, his jaw working. "Things were complicated. I didn't let him off the hook. I've heard some things, Cole, about your finances back then, about my mom." That got his eyes back on mine. He hesitated, then let out a tired laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Guess there's no point pretending anymore." I stayed silent, letting him fill the space. "Your mom," he began, "knew I was in trouble. I was in debt, bad debt. She offered to help. Pay it off. Even give me some money to start a small business. But there was a condition." He looked away again. "She wanted me to marry Melanie." The words hung between us, heavy and sharp. "And you agreed," I said quietly. He didn't answer right away, but the shame in his expression said enough. Finally, he muttered, "I thought it was the smart choice. I thought it would fix everything." I nodded slowly, my stomach twisting, not because I was surprised, but because now I had it. The truth. From him. And I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. I let a moment of silence hang between us after his confession, just long enough for him to think maybe the conversation was over. Then I leaned forward slightly, resting my elbows on the table. "You know," I said casually, "when I saw you at the party, I couldn't figure out why you looked so uncomfortable around Grant. Now it makes perfect sense." Cole's brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" I gave him a small, knowing smile. "Because you've met him before. You used to work for him." The color drained from his face so fast I almost felt sorry for him. "Almost." He started, but I held up my hand. "No need to explain. I already know why you left that job. Or should I say, why you were fired." I let the word linger in the air. "For stealing." His mouth opened and closed like he was searching for an excuse, but nothing came. "Here's the part you probably didn't expect," I continued, my voice calm. "Grant is my husband now, and he remembers every detail. He also still has friends in the industry. Friends who, if they heard certain stories, might be a little less willing to hire you, or do business with you, or trust you at all." Cole's hands tightened around his coffee cup, his knuckles turning white. "You wouldn't." I tilted my head. "I'm not saying I would. I'm just saying I could. One phone call, Cole. That's all it would take. And you know I'm telling the truth." He swallowed hard, his eyes darting away like he was afraid to look at me for too long. I could practically see the thoughts racing in his head. What Melanie knew, what she didn't know, what it would mean if she ever found out. "Speaking of Melanie," I added, keeping my tone almost conversational, "I'm guessing she has no idea about your little history with Grant, or why you really lost that job. She probably thinks you left for a better offer. Am I right?" He didn't answer, but the panic flickering across his face told me everything. I sat back in my chair, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "Relax. I'm not here to destroy you. If I wanted to, I would have done it years ago. I just think you should understand, you didn't win back then. You didn't take something from me and get away with it. You traded whatever we had for a quick fix to your problem, and now you're stuck with the consequence." Cole didn't respond. He just stared into his cup like it might hold an escape. I stood, gathering my bag. "Enjoy the rest of your coffee, Cole, and your life. I'll let you keep both for now." And with that, I walked out, leaving him sitting in that little cafe with the weight of everything I'd just said pressing down on him. It didn't happen right away. For a few weeks after our coffee shop meeting, life went on as usual. I didn't call Cole again, didn't breathe a word of our conversation to anyone but Grant. But small towns have a way of letting secrets slip through the cracks, and I knew it was only a matter of time before mine found its way to the right ear. The first sign came in the form of a short, vague text from Erin. "You might want to sit down for this." I called her immediately. "Melanie knows," Erin said the moment she picked up. "Knows what?" I asked, even though my stomach already knew the answer. "About Cole's firing. And the theft. She found out last night. I don't know how exactly. Maybe someone who overheard you two at the coffee shop. Maybe Cole slipped up. But she knows. And she's not taking it well." Apparently, not taking it well was putting it lightly. Aaron said the fight between them had been loud enough that the neighbors called to check in. Shouting, doors slamming, glass breaking. It had all been on display for half the block. Melanie accused Cole of lying to her for years, of making her look like a fool. Cole tried to defend himself, saying it had all happened before they were married, but that only seemed to make things worse. Within weeks, the cracks in their marriage became too big to ignore. Melanie started showing up at Aaron's house in tears, alternating between rage and humiliation. Cole moved into a small apartment on the other side of town, and by the 3-month mark, Melanie had filed for divorce. I thought that would be the end of it, but then my phone started lighting up with calls from a number I knew by heart, Patricia. I didn't answer. Not the first time, not the 5th, not the 15th. She left voicemails, all variations of the same theme. We should talk. You've made things worse than you realize. We're still family. Family. The word sounded foreign now. When I didn't respond, she tried going through Aaron. But Aaron, to her credit, didn't push me. She just called to fill me in. Your mom's panicking, she said. Melanie's furious with her. Says she ruined her life by pushing her into marrying Cole in the first place. She's blaming her for everything. I almost laughed at the irony. For years, my mother had orchestrated everything to give Melanie the perfect life. Now that life was in ruins, and the daughter she'd favored above all else was turning on her. Sounds like they've got a lot to work out, I said simply. And that was that. I didn't offer comfort, didn't offer advice. I let them sit in the mess they'd made together, the one they'd built on lies and deals and someone else's broken heart. This time, it wasn't my problem to fix. Denver's late autumn evenings had a kind of golden hush to them, the sun dipping low, catching in the glass windows of the old brick building, the air crisp enough to carry the scent of wood smoke from somewhere far off. Grant and I walked side by side, our steps unhurried. It had been months since the last time Aaron had updated me on my family's drama, and by now, even she admitted it had burned itself out. Melanie had moved into a small condo closer to her office. Cole was a rumor in town. No one quite sure where he'd ended up, though the whispers about his past had spread far enough that he wouldn't be finding work in his old circles anytime soon. Patricia had stopped calling, finally realizing I wasn't going to pick up. It wasn't that I didn't have things I could say. Oh, I could have said plenty. I could have told them all, face to face, exactly how they'd underestimated. I could have gloated, reminded them how easily the perfect image they'd tried to build had come crashing down. But somewhere along the way, I'd realized I didn't need to. The satisfaction came from something quieter, from knowing they couldn't rewrite the story anymore, not after the truth had slipped out and done its damage, from the fact that they were now living with the reality they had created for themselves, without me to blame or fix it. Grant squeezed my hand as we walked, his warmth grounding me. I glanced up at him, catching the easy smile that still made my chest feel lighter, even after all these years. He was steady in ways I'd never thought possible, an anchor in a life that had once been all storm. We passed a little bookstore, the kind with handwritten recommendations tucked into the shelves, and he stopped to point at a display in the window. That's the one you were talking about, he said. The one you wanted to read. I smiled. We'll stop in on the way back. It was such a simple exchange, but it carried more weight than any confrontation ever could. Because this life we'd built, free of manipulation, of constantly being measured and found wanting, was the truest revenge I could have ever imagined. They had wanted me small, dependent, willing to settle for scraps. But here I was, walking through a city I loved, beside a man who had chosen me for no reason other than the fact that he wanted me. Not what I could do for him, not what debts I could cover. As the streetlights flickered on and the first hints of winter settled into the air, I let the silence between us stretch. Behind me was the life they had built, now cracked and crumbling. Ahead of me was the life I had built, solid and steady. I didn't need to look back. So, what do you think? Was Lydia right to leave the past behind and let the truth take care of itself? Or should she have confronted her mother and sister face to face? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious to hear your take. And if you love powerful, full-circle stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one.